Alright, so today we're diving into something that's been dominating headlines for years, the tension between the United States and Iran. And the big question is this: why do some analysts say that, despite all the pressure, Iran cannot simply be broken? Let's break it down. First, we need to understand the history. The hostility between these two countries didn't just appear overnight. It really intensified after the Iranian Revolution, when Iran shifted from a U.S. aligned monarchy to an Islamic republic. Since then, distrust and political rivalry have shaped their relationship. Over the years, both countries have accused each other of destabilizing the region, and the conflict has moved through phases of diplomacy, sanctions, and occasional military escalation. Now, one of the biggest tools used by Washington has been economic pressure. The U.S. has implemented waves of sanctions targeting Iran's banking system, oil exports, and international trade. The idea behind this strategy, especially during the maximum pressure campaign, was to weaken Iran's economy so much that the government would be forced to change its policies or negotiate new agreements. And yes, those sanctions have had real consequences. Iran's economy has faced inflation, currency devaluation, and reduced oil revenue. Many ordinary people in Iran have felt the impact directly. Economic research shows that sanctions can significantly slow growth and disrupt trade. But here's where the story gets more complicated. Despite years of economic pressure, Iran has not collapsed politically or strategically. One reason is adaptation. Iranian institutions and businesses have developed ways to continue operating under sanctions, sometimes by rerouting trade, sometimes by using alternative financial networks. Analysts say Iran has learned how to sell oil through indirect channels and partner with countries that are less willing to follow U.S. restrictions. Another factor is geopolitics. Iran isn't isolated in the way some people assume. It has built relationships with powerful global players like China and Russia, which have economic and strategic reasons to maintain cooperation with Tehran. These partnerships can provide diplomatic backing, trade opportunities, and technology exchanges that reduce the impact of Western pressure. Then there's regional influence. Iran has spent decades building networks of alliances across the Middle East. These relationships allow it to project influence beyond its borders, making it a key player in regional conflicts and negotiations. From a strategic perspective, that means Iran cannot easily be ignored or removed from the geopolitical equation. And there's also something psychological and political at play here. Historically, external pressure on a country can sometimes strengthen internal unity rather than weaken it. When a nation feels threatened from outside, people may rally around national identity or sovereignty. In political science, this is sometimes called the rally around the flag effect. We have to look at the bigger picture. International politics rarely operates in simple terms of strong versus weak. Even powerful countries face limits when dealing with nations that have deep historical identity, strategic geography, and long-term alliances. Iran sits in a region that is crucial for global energy routes and security dynamics, which makes any confrontation extremely complex. So when analysts say Iran cannot be broken, what they often mean is that the situation isn't as simple as applying pressure until a country collapses. Instead, it's a long-term geopolitical contest involving economics, diplomacy, regional alliances, and global power balances. And that's why the story of U.S.-Iran tensions continues to evolve, because in international politics, resilience and strategy can matter just as much as raw power. And now the real question becomes how this rivalry will shape the future of the Middle East and the world. When people talk about the tensions between United States and Iran, many assume this conflict is something recent, something driven only by modern politics or current leaders. But the truth is that the roots of this rivalry go back decades, and understanding that history is essential if we want to understand why the relationship between these two nations has remained so strained for so long. To really grasp the situation, we have to look at the events that reshaped Iran's political system and dramatically changed how it interacted with the rest of the world. Before 1979, Iran was ruled by Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, often referred to as the Shah. During his reign, Iran maintained strong political and economic ties with the United States. Washington viewed Iran as an important ally in the Middle East, particularly during the era of the Cold War. Iran's geographic location made it strategically valuable, and the two countries cooperated closely in areas such as security, oil production, and regional influence. From the perspective of U.S. foreign policy at the time, Iran served as a key partner in maintaining stability in a region that was often shaped by competing global powers. However, inside Iran, dissatisfaction with the Shah's rule was steadily growing. Many Iranians criticized the government for political repression, economic inequality, and its close alignment with Western powers. These tensions eventually led to widespread protests and demonstrations across the country. The situation reached a turning point in 1979, when the Iranian Revolution overthrew the monarchy and replaced it with a new political system led by religious leadership. This revolution dramatically changed Iran's domestic politics and its foreign policy priorities. After the revolution, Iran established the Islamic Republic of Iran, guided by the leadership of Ruhollah Khomeini. The new government strongly criticized Western influence in Iranian affairs and emphasized independence from foreign powers. As a result, relations with the United States deteriorated rapidly. One of the most significant moments in this period was the Iran hostage crisis, when a group of Iranian students seized the U.S. embassy in Tehran and held American diplomats hostage for more than a year. The crisis shocked audiences around the world and deeply damaged the relationship between the two countries. From that point forward, the political relationship between Iran and the United States shifted from partnership to confrontation. Diplomatic ties were severed, and mistrust became a defining feature of their interactions. Over the following decades, disagreements expanded into multiple areas including regional conflicts, nuclear development, economic sanctions, and security policies in the Middle East. Each side accused the other of destabilizing the region and undermining international security. Another factor that deepened the rivalry was the Iran-Iraq War, which began shortly after the revolution. During that war, the United States supported Iraq diplomatically and strategically in an effort to counterbalance Iran's growing influence. The war lasted 8 years and caused massive economic damage and loss of life, further shaping Iran's perception of external threats and reinforcing its determination to maintain independence from Western political pressure. As time passed, new conflicts emerged, especially around Iran's nuclear program and its role in regional politics. Negotiations, sanctions, and diplomatic initiatives have all been used at different times in attempts to manage these tensions. Agreements such as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action were designed to limit nuclear development while easing economic restrictions. But disputes over implementation and policy changes have continued to keep the relationship unstable. Understanding this history reveals that the tension between Iran and the United States is not simply about one policy decision or one political moment. It is the result of decades of historical events, shifting alliances, ideological differences, and strategic competition that have shaped how both nations view each other on the global stage. One of the most powerful tools used in international politics is economic pressure, and in the case of tensions between the United States and Iran, sanctions have played a central role for decades. Economic sanctions are essentially restrictions placed on trade, financial systems, specific industries with the goal of influencing another country's policies. Instead of direct military confrontation, sanctions aim to create enough economic difficulty that a government feels compelled to change its behavior or negotiate new agreements. In the modern geopolitical landscape, sanctions have become one of the most common instruments of foreign policy. The United States has imposed multiple waves of sanctions on Iran since the late 20th century, especially following the Iranian Revolution. These sanctions have targeted different parts of the Iranian economy over time, including banking institutions, energy exports, shipping companies, and international investments. The goal behind these restrictions has varied depending on the political context, but they generally revolve around concerns about Iran's regional activities, missile programs, and nuclear development. A major turning point came with the international negotiations surrounding Iran's nuclear program. In 2015, Iran and several world powers reached the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, often referred to as the JCPOA. This agreement involved multiple countries, including the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, and China. The deal placed limits on Iran's nuclear activities and allowed international inspections in exchange for relief from certain economic sanctions. For a period of time, this agreement reduced tensions and allowed Iran to re-enter parts of the global economic system. However, the situation shifted again in 2018 when the United States withdrew from the nuclear agreement during the administration of Donald Trump. Following this withdrawal, Washington launched what became known as the Maximum Pressure Campaign, a strategy designed to apply unprecedented economic pressure on Iran. The campaign targeted Iran's oil exports, which are a crucial source of national revenue, as well as its financial connections to the international banking system. Under these sanctions, many international companies were forced to choose between doing business with Iran or maintaining access to the U.S. financial system. Because the United States plays such a dominant role in global finance, most corporations and banks chose to cut ties with Iran in order to avoid penalties. This dramatically reduced Iran's ability to sell oil openly on the global market and made it more difficult for the country to access foreign investment or international credit. The economic consequences inside Iran were significant. The Iranian currency experienced periods of sharp devaluation, inflation increased, and certain imported goods became more expensive or difficult to obtain. Many industries that depended on global supply chains faced new obstacles, and ordinary citizens often felt the economic strain in daily life. Economic experts frequently point out that sanctions can affect not only governments, but also the broader population, influencing employment, purchasing power, and access to international trade. Despite these pressures, Iran has also developed strategies to adapt. Over time, Iranian businesses and institutions have looked for alternative ways to maintain economic activity. This has included expanding regional trade networks, developing domestic industries, and cooperating more closely with countries that are less aligned with U.S. sanctions policies. Some trade has moved through indirect routes or intermediaries, allowing goods and resources to continue flowing even under restrictive conditions. Another important factor is the role of global powers such as China and Russia, which maintain diplomatic and economic relationships with Iran. These partnerships have created opportunities for energy trade, infrastructure investment, and political cooperation that help offset some of the pressure created by Western sanctions. While sanctions have undoubtedly placed limits on Iran's economy, they have also encouraged the country to explore new economic partnerships and strategies. The use of sanctions in this context highlights a broader reality about international politics. Economic pressure can influence behavior and create significant challenges, but its long-term effectiveness often depends on global cooperation, alternative alliances, and a nation's ability to adapt to changing economic conditions. Another major factor that shapes the geopolitical strength of Iran is its network of regional alliances and strategic relationships across the Middle East. In international politics, influence is rarely determined only by economic power or military size. It is often defined by partnerships, shared interests, and the ability to shape events beyond a country's own borders. Over the past several decades, Iran has invested heavily in building connections with governments, political movements, and organizations throughout the region. These relationships have given Iran a level of regional influence that plays an important role in its broader geopolitical strategy. To understand why these alliances matter, it helps to look at the geography and political landscape of the Middle East. Iran sits in a strategically important location between Central Asia, the Persian Gulf, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Because of this position, developments inside Iran can influence events across multiple regions. Iranian leaders have often emphasized what they describe as a defensive strategy, aiming to maintain strong relationships with groups and governments that share similar interests or concerns about regional security. One of the most frequently discussed examples is Iran's relationship with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah emerged in the 1980s during the period following the Lebanese Civil War, and it has since developed into a powerful political and military organization within Lebanon. Iran has provided financial assistance, training, and political support to Hezbollah for decades. Supporters of this relationship often describe it as part of a strategy to counter external threats, while critics argue that it contributes to instability in the region. Iran also maintains close ties with the government of Syria, particularly under the leadership of Bashar al-Assad. During the Syrian civil war, Iran supported the Syrian government with economic assistance, military advisors, and logistical cooperation. This partnership has been strategically important for both countries. For Syria, Iranian support has been a crucial element in maintaining government control in certain areas. For Iran, the alliance strengthens its influence in the Eastern Mediterranean and reinforces its network of regional partners. Another example can be seen in Iraq, where Iran has developed relationships with various political parties and militia groups, particularly after the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The removal of Saddam Hussein dramatically changed the political balance in the region and opened new opportunities for Iran to expand its diplomatic and security relationships within Iraq. Over time, cooperation between Iranian officials and certain Iraqi groups has played a role in shaping security policies and political dynamics inside the country. These alliances are sometimes described by analysts as part of what is called the axis of resistance, a loose alignment of groups and governments that oppose certain Western and Israeli policies in the region. From Iran's perspective, these relationships serve as a strategic buffer against external pressure. By maintaining influence across multiple countries, Iran can extend its political reach and ensure that regional developments do not occur without its involvement. Critics of Iran's strategy argue that these alliances contribute to ongoing tensions and conflicts throughout the Middle East. Governments such as Israel and the United States frequently express concern about Iran's support for armed groups and its growing influence in neighboring countries. These concerns have led to sanctions, diplomatic disputes, and occasional military confrontations involving Iranian allies. Supporters of Iran's approach, on the other hand, often frame these alliances as a response to decades of external pressure and regional rivalry. From this perspective, maintaining partnerships with groups across the Middle East is seen as a way to ensure national security and prevent isolation. By building networks of cooperation, Iran increases its ability to respond to threats and maintain influence in a region where power balances can shift quickly. The existence of these alliances means that Iran's role in the Middle East extends far beyond its national borders. Political decisions made in Tehran can influence events in multiple countries, and regional conflicts often involve actors connected to Iranian policy in one way or another. This network of relationships has become one of the defining features of Iran's geopolitical strategy. Another critical element in understanding the geopolitical position of Iran is the role of global partnerships and international alliances beyond the Middle East. In modern international politics, no country operates completely alone. Economic survival, political influence, and technological development often depend on cooperation with other major powers. Over the past 2 decades, Iran has focused on strengthening relationships with countries that are willing to maintain diplomatic and economic ties despite Western pressure. Among the most significant of these partnerships are Iran's growing connections with China and Russia. These relationships have developed gradually, but have become increasingly important as economic sanctions from the United States and some Western allies intensified. For Iran, cooperation with major global powers provides opportunities for trade, infrastructure investment, and political support in international institutions. For China and Russia, maintaining ties with Iran can serve strategic and economic interests, particularly in areas such as energy security, regional influence, and global power competition. China has become one of Iran's most important economic partners. As one of the world's largest energy consumers, China relies heavily on imported oil and gas. Iran possesses some of the largest proven oil and natural gas reserves in the world, making it a valuable long-term energy partner. Even during periods of heavy sanctions, reports have suggested that Iranian oil has continued to reach Asian markets through complex trading networks and indirect shipping routes. These arrangements have allowed Iran to maintain a portion of its energy exports despite restrictions on its official participation in global markets. In addition to energy trade, Iran and China have explored long-term economic cooperation through infrastructure projects and investment agreements. One of the most widely discussed initiatives is the 25-year cooperation plan between the two countries, which outlines potential collaboration in transportation networks, industrial development, telecommunications, and financial systems. Many analysts link this agreement to China's broader Belt and Road Initiative, a project aimed at expanding trade routes and economic connectivity across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Iran's geographic location makes it an attractive transit hub within this network, connecting Central Asia, the Persian Gulf, and Mediterranean trade routes. Russia has also emerged as a significant partner for Iran in both political and security matters. The two countries have cooperated closely in regional conflicts, particularly during the Syrian civil war, where both supported the government of Bashar al-Assad. This cooperation strengthened diplomatic ties between Moscow and Tehran and demonstrated how shared strategic interests can bring countries together despite differences in political systems or global alliances. Beyond regional conflicts, Russia and Iran have also expanded cooperation in energy development, military technology, and economic coordination. Both countries are major energy producers and have discussed ways to coordinate oil and gas strategies within global markets. In addition, diplomatic coordination between Russia and Iran has sometimes been visible in international organizations such as the United Nations, where major powers negotiate resolutions and policies related to sanctions, regional conflicts, and nuclear programs. These global partnerships highlight an important reality of international politics. Sanctions and diplomatic pressure rarely exist in isolation. When one group of countries imposes restrictions, targeted states often look for alternative alliances that can reduce the impact of those measures. In Iran's case, partnerships with China and Russia have provided economic channels, diplomatic backing, and strategic cooperation that help balance Western pressure. At the same time, these relationships are not always simple or perfectly aligned. China, Russia, and Iran each have their own national interests and strategic priorities. Cooperation between them often depends on shifting political circumstances, economic incentives, and global power dynamics. Nonetheless, the existence of these partnerships demonstrates how Iran has attempted to maintain connections with major global actors while navigating a challenging international environment shaped by sanctions, diplomatic disputes, and ongoing geopolitical competition. Another important dimension in understanding the resilience of Iran under external pressure is the way internal social and political dynamics respond to outside threats. In international relations, it is often assumed that strong economic sanctions or political pressure will weaken a government's authority and lead to internal instability. However, history shows that the reaction inside a country can sometimes move in the opposite direction. When a nation faces sustained external pressure, political narratives centered on sovereignty, independence, and national identity can become more powerful. In Iran's case, these themes have played a significant role in shaping how society and leadership respond to international challenges. Since the Iranian Revolution, the political system of Iran has placed strong emphasis on resistance to foreign influence and the protection of national independence. The revolutionary leadership, guided by figures such as Ruhollah Khomeini, framed the new state as a system built on self-determination and cultural identity. These ideas became embedded in political discourse, media narratives, and national education. As a result, external criticism or sanctions are often interpreted through the lens of historical experiences with foreign intervention. One historical memory that frequently shapes Iranian political thinking is the 1953 Iranian coup d'état, an event widely associated with the involvement of foreign intelligence services from the United States and the United Kingdom. The coup removed Mohammad Mossadegh, who had nationalized Iran's oil industry, and restored greater power to the monarchy under Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. For many Iranians, this event remains a powerful symbol of foreign interference in national affairs. Political leaders often reference this history when discussing modern sanctions or diplomatic pressure. Because of these historical experiences, external pressure can sometimes strengthen domestic political unity rather than weaken it. Political scientists often describe this phenomenon as the rally round the flag effect. When citizens perceive their country as being threatened by foreign powers, support for national leadership or institutions may temporarily increase, even among groups that normally disagree with government policies. This does not eliminate internal debates or political divisions, but it can shift public attention toward national solidarity. In Iran, public opinion and political discussion remain diverse and complex. The country has multiple political factions, ranging from reform-oriented groups that support diplomatic engagement with Western countries to more conservative factions that emphasize resistance and self-reliance. Elections for the presidency and parliament regularly involve debates about economic policy, international relations, and social reforms. However, when tensions with foreign governments escalate, political narratives emphasizing national independence tend to become more prominent in public discourse. Economic challenges created by sanctions have also encouraged a policy approach sometimes described as economic self-sufficiency. Iranian officials often refer to this strategy as strengthening domestic production, reducing reliance on foreign imports, and investing in local industries. The goal is to reduce vulnerability to external economic pressure while maintaining essential sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, and energy development. This strategy has influenced government programs aimed at supporting domestic technology development, expanding local manufacturing capacity, and encouraging regional trade partnerships. Universities, research institutions, and industrial sectors have increasingly focused on innovation in areas such as medicine, engineering, and renewable energy. While these efforts face limitations due to restricted access to international financial systems and advanced technology markets, they also demonstrate how prolonged external pressure can motivate internal economic adaptation. The interaction between historical memory, national identity, and political strategy plays an important role in shaping how Iranian society responds to external challenges. Instead of viewing pressure only as a source of weakness, political leaders often frame it as a reason to strengthen internal unity and pursue policies designed to maintain national independence and resilience. Another key aspect in understanding the broader geopolitical situation surrounding Iran is recognizing how international power dynamics influence conflicts and rivalries between nations. Global politics rarely operates in simple terms where one country can easily dominate another. Instead, power is distributed across military strength, economic resources, strategic geography, alliances, and political influence. In the case of tensions involving Iran, these factors interact in complex ways that shape both regional stability and global diplomacy. One of the most important elements in Iran's strategic position is geography. Iran sits at the crossroads of several major regions, including the Middle East, Central Asia, and South Asia. This location places it close to key international trade routes and energy corridors. One particularly significant waterway near Iran is the Strait of Hormuz, through which a large portion of the world's oil supply passes every day. Because of this, developments involving Iran can quickly affect global energy markets and international shipping routes. Any disruption in this area would have consequences far beyond the region. Iran also possesses one of the largest energy reserves in the world, including vast deposits of oil and natural gas. These resources make the country an important potential supplier in global energy markets. Energy exports have historically played a major role in Iran's national economy, and they remain a significant factor in international negotiations and sanctions policies. Countries that rely heavily on energy imports often monitor developments involving Iran closely because shifts in supply or pricing can influence global economic stability. Another factor shaping the geopolitical situation is the presence of competing regional powers. Countries such as Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Turkey each pursue their own strategic interests in the Middle East. These nations sometimes view Iran's growing influence with concern, particularly when it comes to regional security, missile development, and alliances with political groups across neighboring countries. As a result, the Middle East often becomes an arena where multiple rivalries intersect, involving both regional and global actors. The role of major global powers also contributes to this complex landscape. The United States has maintained a strong military presence in the region for decades, with alliances involving countries throughout the Persian Gulf. At the same time, other major powers such as Russia and China increasingly engage in diplomacy and economic cooperation within the region. This creates a multipolar environment where different global powers support different initiatives, agreements, and security arrangements. Diplomacy has periodically attempted to reduce tensions through negotiation and international agreements. One of the most prominent examples was the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which involved multiple countries working together to regulate Iran's nuclear activities while easing economic sanctions. The agreement demonstrated that international cooperation could create frameworks for managing complex disputes. However, changes in political leadership and disagreements over implementation have kept the future of such agreements uncertain. Military considerations also influence the geopolitical balance. Iran has invested heavily in defensive capabilities, including missile technology and naval forces designed to protect its coastline and strategic waterways. These capabilities are often presented by Iranian officials as deterrence measures intended to discourage potential attacks. Other countries in the region, however, frequently interpret these developments as potential threats, which contributes to ongoing security debates and arms competition. Public narratives in different countries further shape how these geopolitical tensions are perceived. Media outlets, political leaders, and analysts often interpret events through their own national perspective, emphasizing different aspects of the conflict. This means that global audiences may encounter very different explanations of the same developments depending on the sources they follow. The interaction of geography, energy resources, military capabilities, diplomatic negotiations, and competing alliances demonstrates how complex international politics can become. Each decision made by governments in this environment has the potential to influence regional stability, global markets, and the future direction of diplomatic relationships between nations. When you step back and look at the entire picture, the story of tensions between the United States and Iran is not just about threats, sanctions, or political speeches. It is about decades of history, competing interests, and a complex global system where power is never controlled by a single factor. The rivalry has been shaped by revolutionary change, economic pressure, regional alliances, global partnerships, and deeply rooted national identities that influence how each country sees the world. The historical turning point of the Iranian Revolution changed the direction of Iran's politics and its relationship with Western powers. Since that moment, mistrust and confrontation have defined much of the interaction between the two countries. Economic sanctions, especially those connected to policies like the maximum pressure campaign, have attempted to weaken Iran's economy and influence its decisions. Yet the long-term results of these strategies reveal something important about international politics. Pressure alone does not always produce the expected outcome. Over time, Iran has adapted by building networks of influence across the Middle East, maintaining relationships with regional actors, and strengthening connections with global powers such as China and Russia. These alliances, combined with Iran's strategic location and energy resources, make the country an important player in regional and global affairs. Geography, particularly near critical routes like the Strait of Hormuz, gives Iran a level of geopolitical importance that cannot easily be ignored. At the same time, the internal dynamics within Iran show how national identity and historical experience shape a country's response to outside pressure. Memories of past foreign intervention, including events like the 1953 Iranian Coup d'etat, continue to influence political narratives about sovereignty and independence. When external threats increase, These narratives can strengthen domestic unity and reinforce the determination to resist outside influence. All of this demonstrates a broader lesson about global politics. Nations are not simply broken by economic sanctions or political threats. They evolve, adapt, and find new pathways through alliances, innovation, and strategic positioning. The case of Iran shows how history, geography, and political identity combine to shape resilience in the face of international pressure. Understanding this complexity is essential for anyone trying to analyze global conflicts or predict future developments. The relationship between the United States and Iran will likely continue to shift as new leaders' policies and global circumstances emerge. What remains clear is that the story is far more complicated than simple narratives of strength and weakness. It is a long-running geopolitical struggle shaped by history, power, strategy, and the enduring determination of nations to protect their interests on the world stage.